Can Kamala Harris overcome the biggest challenge of her campaign? Eric Levitz, a senior correspondent at Vox. He covers a wide range of politics and policy issues, with a particular focus on the questions that divide the American left and right. Before coming to Vox in 2024, he wrote a column on politics and economics for New York Magazine. The Trump campaign wants to run an anti-police, open borders communist, and they believe they can give Vice President Kamala Harris that role. For her part, Harris has struggled to fend off accusations of ideological extremism. By abandoning some progressive commitments, embracing conservative rhetoric, and declaring herself an economic populist, she has sought to define herself as the kind of Democrat that swing voters can trust. Much of this week's Democratic National Convention will likely focus on that rebranding effort. In a recent New York Times poll of 3 battleground states, 44% of voters said Harris was too liberal, while only 34% said Trump was too conservative. And in a Gallup poll conducted in June, 56% of voters said Biden was too liberal while 44% said Trump was too conservative. Given all of this, it's no surprise that Trump's team is taking a hard line on the claim that Harris is extremely liberal, or, in the Republican nominee's signature hyperbole, that she wants this country to go communist immediately, if not sooner. Since her campaign launched a month ago, Harris has sought to align herself with the majority in, at least, 3 separate ways. First, she has pivoted significantly, abandoning her most left-leaning issue positions from 2020 while touting her support for bipartisan border security legislation and her tough prosecutorial record. Second, she has framed progressive issues from a philosophically conservative perspective, framing her social policies as efforts to protect individual liberty from excessive government intervention and her fiscal agenda as, among other things, a plan to help those who strive to build generational wealth. Finally, Harris has positioned herself as a defender of the middle class and her opponents as servants of the wealthy few. In asserting her role as economic populist, Harris has not shied away from peddling ideas that are fundamentally leftist but popular. All 3 of these tactics have merit. Political scientists have shown that each tactic has potential electoral benefits. In both this ad and her campaign speeches, Harris has pledged to implement the Senate's bipartisan border security bill. That bill would limit asylum when too many migrants attempt to cross the U.S. border at once, while also raising the legal threshold for asylum claims. This represents a shift from the Democrats' traditional stance on border security, which has held that border reinforcements should be paired with some form of amnesty for long-time undocumented U.S. residents. And the bill is even more in stark contrast to Harris's 2019 stance on immigration, which prioritized humanitarian concerns over law enforcement. Now, she clearly has no qualms about holding murderers and drug dealers in jail. So far, this shift in tone and emphasis doesn't seem to signal major shifts in specific policy positions. But it's plausible that a Democratic candidate who wins on Harris's 2024 message might be reluctant to sign off on major cuts to criminal sentencing and eager to expand the number of sheriffs. These changes could have electoral benefits, even if Harris's new border security policy doesn't seem to address the dysfunction of our current immigration system. American voters' views on both crime and immigration have trended to the right over the past 4 years. As of February, 77% of Americans considered the situation at the southern border a crisis or major problem, according to Pew Research. Meanwhile, in a Gallup poll released in July, a majority of Americans said they wanted to reduce immigration for the first time since 2005. When the Democratic pollster Navigator asked Americans whether they supported the bipartisan border security bill, which it described as legislation that would increase funding for border security and make it harder for migrants to claim asylum, 66% supported it, while just 21% opposed it. At the same time, yes, the percentage of Americans who consider crime to be an extremely or very serious problem in the United States has skyrocketed under Biden, according to Gallup polling, and this year's decline in violent crime has done little to ease public concerns. The fact that voters have shifted to immigration does not necessarily mean that Democrats will benefit electorally from doing so. Some commentators and scholars question whether candidates' issue positions have a significant impact on voter behavior. After all, many swing voters do not follow politics closely and are unaware of even the most basic policy differences between the two parties. And research shows that voters' social identities and candidates' non-ideological qualities, like attractiveness, have significant political implications. Polls consistently show that voters trust Trump more than both Biden and Harris to address immigration. There are a few different ways to approach that task. Harris could say that her 4 years in public office have forced her to update her understanding of what policies are both substantively effective and politically realistic. Or she could cite a changing set of contextual facts. Crime is higher now than it was when she first ran for president, and the challenges of resettling large numbers of asylum seekers have become more severe. Either way, she needs some narrative that makes her policy changes seem sincere, resolute, and thoughtful. This week's Democratic National Convention gives her the chance to tell that story.